Thank you for joining me for building native multi-device apps, including iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus with FireUI. My name is Sarina Dupont, and I'm a Senior Product Manager here at Embarcadero Technologies. You can also follow me on Twitter at Sarina Dupont. Now let's quickly go over how the skill sprints work. We provide about 20 minutes or so of technical knowledge on the specific topic, followed by live Q&A. Now, what is FireUI? Now, FireUI is our collection of technologies that makes it really easy for you to create a shared user interface across many different devices and target platforms, including Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS. And it really consists of multiple key technologies. One part, of course, is our UI form designer that provides you the ability to work with a master form as well as create views for a specific target device. We also have a MultiView component that we introduced in XC7, and the MultiView component is a layout and menu component that you can parent any type of controls to, and it can present itself in different layouts, so to speak. So for example, it can be a slide-in drawer or a push-over drawer. It can be a docked panel in landscape mode. It can be a pop-over menu, etc. And by default, we have built in various functionality depending on the form factor, orientation, as well as target platform. The MultiView component behaves differently according to what the user has set. And there are default behaviors that are set and invoked via the behavior services that we introduced in XC7. But you could also override that behavior by customizing the MultiView component yourself. Now, behavior services were introduced in XC7 to allow you to define, for example, the behavior of a control. So by default, we have defined the behavior of the tab control, for example, to display tabs on the bottom with glyphs on iOS and on the top without glyphs on Android. And that allows you to easily follow the design paradigms and guidelines across all those different platforms. You could, of course, manually override those as well if you wanted to. Now, the multi-device designer introduces the concept of a master view, and the master view is where you design and lay out your application, and then you can create specific views for each target platform or target device. And the master view uses stream inheritance to manage the deltas between what you have designed and laid out on the master and what you have fine-tuned for each of the different views that you've created. And it's really just one project and one form across all devices, and it provides shared user interface code and event handling. But if there are specific events that you want to handle differently, for example, on a specific form factor, you can customize that by selecting that control on the specific view and changing the event handler if an existing event handler exists, or create a new one if you haven't set one up yet on the master. Again, just to quickly recap, you have your master form with the master view, and then you can customize the master or create specific views for each target device or target platform. And you can select from the native built-in styles. So at design time, you can choose from native iOS 8 styles, Android styles, Windows styles, and Mac styles. Or you can also work with our custom styles that we make available as part of our bonus offer with XC7 right now. You can access the premium style pack, and those styles can be loaded and applied to your application using the T-Stylebook component. Now let's talk about the iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus support in RadStudio XC7. In RadStudio XC7, you can create a view specific for the iPhone 6, that would be a 4.7-inch view, or the iPhone 6 Plus, which would be your 5.5-inch view. Now, the iPhone 6 is a 2x Retina resolution device, and that's the same resolution as the iPhone 5, for example. Of course, there's also Retina resolution on newer MacBooks. That's a 2x resolution. And then the iPhone 6 Plus is a 5.5-inch device, which you can also select from the available views in the IDE if you select the views from the drop-down menu on the Form Designer. And it's a 3x resolution. So the styles, the native styles, as well as the premium styles have been updated to include support for the iPhone 6 Plus with a 3x resolution. For both the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, we provide the iOS 8 native UI styles in 2x and 3x resolution. And we also provide iOS 8 premium styles as part of our premium style pack. And that provides, again, also 2x and 3x resolution. And 3x resolution would be used on the iPhone 6 Plus. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the T MultiView component in iPhone 6 Plus. So with iPhone 6 Plus, Apple introduced this new concept of a docked side-by-side layout when you rotate the iPhone 6 Plus into landscape mode, because it's really more of a phablet form factor. It's kind of an in-between of a tablet and a phone form factor. And so the T MultiView component was updated to display itself as a docked panel in landscape mode when it's run on an iPhone 6 Plus, and that's the default behavior. So for example, if you take the master detail template and you run it on an iPhone 6 Plus in portrait mode, you get the regular display without the menu, and you would swipe in from the left side using your finger to display the master list, for example, as you can see in the screenshot. But then when you rotate it to landscape mode, you will see the master list and detail displayed in a side-by-side fashion, and that's that docked panel that I mentioned. You can, of course, overwrite that if you wanted to continue with the design paradigm of displaying a drawer that's only visible by swiping it into view. Now let's get started with a demonstration of how you can build native multi-device apps, including iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus with FireUI. So let's have a look at creating our first FireUI multi-device application. So we're going to go to File, New, Multi-Device Application, Delphi. You can, of course, also choose Multi-Device Application, C++ Builder. And I'm going to select a blank form. And here you see the form designer, and you can also select the style of your master view. And it's important to set the style up front and decide what style you want to use for the master. Now, while you could change that later on, each style has specific predefined height and width for each of the different controls. So, for example, a speed button in the Windows style might be 30 by 30 pixels, and in an iOS style might be 60 by 60 pixels. And so you want to predefine what style you want to use on the master. And usually I would recommend to use the style that's most common to your target platforms. Of course, if you're building an app for all 4 platforms, it's really what you're going to be designing with the most on the master. So you can, of course, fine-tune it on each of the views if you like. But it's recommended to set the style that you want to see up before you get started designing the application, because otherwise the size differences across the different styles can affect the layout of your user interface, at least to a certain extent. So in this particular case, I'm going to select Windows. You can, of course, also select OS X, iOS, or Android. And then we have here our master view, and you can see from the drop-down, you see all the available views. And so we have views for Windows Desktop and Windows Tablet here, Surface Pro, OS X Desktop, and a range of iPhone devices. We have a 3.5-inch and a 4-inch, and then a 4.7 and 5.5, and an iPad. 4.7-inch is the new iPhone 6, and the iPhone 5.5-inch is the new iPhone 6 Plus. And then we also have a range of Android phone and tablet form factors, and of course also Google Glass here as well. Now you can also create your own views for a specific form factor. So let's say your company has standardized on a specific phone, for example, and you want to be able to fine-tune the user interface and layout of your application for that particular form factor. In that case, you can create your own view and then install that into the IDE so that you can see the view right here from the drop-down, so you can fine-tune the user interface for that view. And then you would add it to the users clause so that at runtime it will select that particular view when it's running the application. Okay, so let's start out by putting a toolbar onto a form here and a label. And I'm going to align the label to content. And I'm going to center it. It's really important when you're developing an application for multiple platforms to go ahead and use anchors, alignment margins, etc. And we have a text settings property here. We can select the horizontal alignment, so for example, center. And then we also have a font property. So the style across Windows, iOS, Android, and Mac, each style has predefined properties for the height and width of each element. So for example, here we have predefined settings for the label font. If you wanted to override any of those, you just select the control on the master here and select Styled Settings. And then you could override, for example, the size or the font color. And if you uncheck those, you're then able to select those properties within text settings. So for example, here I unchecked font color, and I can change that now to blue, for example. Or font size, and you can then go in and set that to a larger font. You can switch here between, of course, OS X, iOS, and Android. So I'm going to check that again, and I'm going to go back to the kind of standard settings for a toolbar label. Now, the best process for laying out your application on the master is to, of course, use alignment and anchors. So for example, here I have a toolbar with a parented label. And let's say I want to also display a button. So I'm going to use my speed button. And I'm going to select the alignment of left. And I'm going to change the style here to a glyph button. So for example, the action tool button. This is the design of the control if you wanted to, for example, invoke the share sheet or the sharing functionality across Android or iOS, you would use this icon. And now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to set a margin on the left side of, let's say, 2. And maybe 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom. And that matters more depending on the controls. So for some of the controls, if they're transparent and you're just seeing the glyph and you don't have a selected highlight color, it's really not that relevant. But if you have a button style, like a traditional button style, I'll show you an example here, you're going to want to set a margin for the top and bottom. So for example, if we have a look at the button style here, you're going to want to set the margin for top and bottom so that the button doesn't actually run into the edges of the toolbar. So I'm going to go back here and select a glyph. And I'm going to change the name of my toolbar label, the application title, to application title. Okay, so now I want to create some views. So I'm going to create a view for iPhone 4.7 inch. And I'm going to create a view for Android 4 inch. Now, if you're looking to customize the user interface for just a platform rather than the specific form factor or device, then you only need to create one platform-specific view. So what that means is if I wanted to target iOS and Android, but I wasn't too concerned about specific layout changes for each of the different form factors, and I wanted to just add platform-specific behavior, for example, display a different message to an Android user than I want an iOS user, then you just need to create one iOS view and one Android view. Of course, if you want to fully customize the look and feel of that particular view in the application, you're going to want to create a device-specific view. So here I have my iOS iPhone 4.7 inch view, and then I also have my iPhone 5.5 inch view. Now, the styling that you see here is a native built-in style. So for iPhone 5.5, we have a 3x style built in. So iPhone 5.5 inch, which is the iPhone 6 Plus, is a high-resolution device, higher resolution than the 4.7 inch iPhone 6, and we have built-in support for 3x styling, and that's also true for custom styles as well. So if you were to load a style via a stylebook, you would put a stylebook onto your form. Again, when you're working with custom styles, you want to, on the master, load the custom style that's related to the stylebook, the style option that you've set here. So in this case, I've set Android. You're going to go to the stylebook and select your premium style. So for example, Coral Crystal, apply and close. And then on the form, you have to go and select the stylebook, and it will apply the style. Now you go down to, for example, iPhone 4.7 inch. Again, you double click on the style and you load your iOS specific style. Apply and close. And then you want to go through and do the same for all the different views. So if you have an iPhone view and an iPad view, you're going to want to select the style each time. And the same is true across Android as well. So for example, if I'm running this application or deploying this application on iPhone 6 Plus, it will show the iPhone 6 Plus style. If I deploy it to an iPhone 6, it will show the iPhone 6 version of the style, which is a 2x resolution. Now let's go back to the master here. We have application title in our icon. Let's say we wanted to change something just on the iPhone view. In that case, you're going to want to go to the iPhone view and make your changes there, because anything you change on the master gets streamed down into the individual views. So for example, here I could change this title to my iOS app. And then if I go to my Android application, I'm going to change it to my Android app. Of course, if you create multiple views for iOS, you're going to have to make that change each time. That's why it's recommended to make most of your changes on the master and then just fine-tune the differences on each of the views. So for example, my iPhone 6 Plus title. And you can also, of course, change, for example, here the style of that particular glyph button. So you could change it to something else if you had different functionality, for example. And here's a good example of where you'd want to set the margins so that the icon doesn't run to the left side of your toolbar. And of course, you could also, if you wanted to have a control that you just want to see here on this particular view, you would set the visibility to false. So for example, if on your iPhone 6 Plus, you don't want to show a particular button, you would just set visibility to false and it wouldn't be visible on the iPhone 6 Plus. So I'm going to set the visibility back here to true. And I'm going to go back to my master and I'll set up an event. Just do a basic show message. I have a FMX file for iPhone 4.7 inch, my Android device, and my iPhone 5.5 inch. And I'm going to go to my 4.7 inch device and look at the code. And this is the code that we set up for the button one click. Now, if we wanted to change that, we could select the control here, go to our event, and we could change this to, for example, say iOS. And then we could say show message. You are using iOS. And you will see here that we still have our original event that was set up on the master, but here on this iOS device, we're going to fire the iOS specific event. So let's have another look at a demo here that I have. It's a good example of designing an application for multiple platforms. So for example, here I'm using the MultiView control, and this is a control that allows you to fully customize user interface, and it can be rendered as either a slide and drawer, a pop-over menu, a dock panel, etc. And in this case, what I have here is I have my multi-view, and I have a toolbar here at the top, and I have a list view that's bound to some sample data. And now, as you can see, if I go, for example, to iPhone 4 inch, what's going to happen is at runtime, this will be displayed as my slide and drawer. So I can go ahead at design time here and disable the visibility of the multi-view component. And you can see this is what's going to be shown unless the user slides in the drawer, for example. I'm going to fine tune this, and I'm actually going to change the font to a smaller font so that it fits more properly. And I'm actually going to move this over a little bit. So this allows you then to fully customize the position of the controls and the layout for that particular form factor. And so you're going to be able to swipe in, make your user selection, and then bring up the employee profile as you can see in the sample application. Here I have a lot more room because it's a Windows application, but on my iPhone view, I don't have room in some cases to display a lot of text. So what you could do is if you wanted to hide the notes in your iPhone application, you would just go and select Memo 1 and then set the visibility to false. And so then at runtime on an iPhone 4 device, iPhone 4-inch device, it's not going to show that memo. That also allows you to customize the user interface, for example, for a tablet. So for example, if you had a lot more text here or you had additional user interface elements on this form, you could then select them for your iPad or your Android tablet device, and you could go ahead and customize the layout You could show more user interface controls, have a T image, for example, on here. You could allow the user to attach files, etc., for this particular employee in this demo application. And you're able to fully leverage the layout and form factor of a tablet. And of course, on your iPhone or Android device, you would go ahead and select that control and then set the visibility to false so that it's not shown on that particular form factor. And that's a good example of being able to fully customize the user interface according to the form factor. And now, I'm going to also show you a quick demo here of a master detail template application. And the master detail template application is part of the new multi-device application wizard. So for example, I'll show you here at design time. If I'm running this app on an iPhone 6 Plus, 5.5-inch device, you're going to see at runtime, you're going to see it as a docked panel. The employee list displayed as a docked panel when it's in landscape mode, and in portrait mode, it's going to display this is a slide and drawer. So what you're going to see is you're going to see the main UI, which is the employee's profile, unless you swipe in and invoke the drawer. And on a 4.7-inch device, since it's a smaller form factor, you're going to see the drawer whether it's in portrait mode or in landscape mode. And I'm going to show you what this looks like at runtime here on an iPhone 6 device in both portrait and landscape mode. Now, before we get to some live Q&A, I wanted to just point out a couple of key places where you can get more information about the multi-device designer, FireUI, and how to get started quickly. You can check out the guided tour on the Start Here page in the IDE. So when you launch Rhapsody XE7 and you click on Start Here on the Welcome page, one of the top links is the guided tour link. And that will provide a step-by-step tutorial, an interactive tutorial, in the IDE to help you get started building your first FireUI multi-device application. I've also included a couple of DocWiki links here on the slide for the form designer, as well as FireMonkey Views and how you can work with FireMonkey Views, and then also a link to the premium styles. Now, next time, we're going to learn about the Bitmap Style Designer, presented by Brian Alexakis, Product Marketing Manager here at Embarcadero Technologies, and he's going to show you how to customize user interface elements with the Bitmap Style Designer. Now, let's open it up to some questions.
Okay, and we're here in the studio with Sarina Dupont. Sarina.
Hello.
And Jim McKeith.
Hello, everybody.
He's here in Scotts Valley as well. And on the line, we've also got Marco Cantu in case we also need any help. Lots of hellos to everybody. And again, Happy New Year to everyone. Let's see. So Jens was asking, so the app will detect if it's iPhone 6 and automatically go to the correct resolution?
Yes, so the styles, we updated the styles in XE7 Update 1 to include both 2x and 3x resolution. So we use our built-in support to detect the device resolution to show the related and appropriate graphics. So given that with the iPhone 6 Plus, Apple introduced a 3x device. So previously the devices like the iPhone 5, 5C, for example, as well as certain iPads were Retina 2X devices, just like the MacBook, or the newer MacBooks are from Apple. But with the iPhone 6 Plus, was the first time they introduced really a higher resolution. I think it's like 420 ppi device. So it's a much higher resolution device that requires higher resolution graphics, because when you're building a style and you're deploying it to a higher resolution device, if you don't have the appropriately sized graphics available, they would appear smaller. So that's something, it's a similar mechanism as we're using also on Android. So for example, on Android we have 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x because there were higher resolution devices on Android before, for example. So we have that built-in mechanism. We've had that for a while, and we just updated it with XE7 Update 1 to provide 2x and 3x resolution.
And then Jens followed it by saying iPhone 6 Plus, that is. So really iPhone 6 Plus resolutions handled again by the
correct
the code. Raphael's asking if the app is going to be run in different devices apart from iPhone 6, is it possible to check the device resolution or screen size?
Yeah, so we have code to check what the resolution is, and there's actually, I think there are some blog posts on that, on how to detect the device resolution. Is that something you actually blogged about, David?
Oh boy, I've blogged so much I don't remember.
But I think, or maybe Jim, I think somebody has blogged about it.
I think I had a blog post about that, but I can't remember for sure.
But we can look for that. One of the things I can do after the presentation is create a blog post that summarizes some of the links that we mentioned, because I saw that was one of the requests here as well, and provide some links to the write-ups I've done in the past on frequently asked questions, FireUI, as well as finding some of the existing blog posts by Jim, for example, that covers how to detect the resolution. But we do that automatically. So, for example, you saw that in the IDE we have views for 3.5-inch, 4-inch, 4.7-inch, 5.5-inch. So if you're creating a view for each, at runtime we will detect what the resolution is and calculate what the correct view should be, and then load that accordingly.
John, there's been a couple comments here about people like your voice. It's easy to listen to and keeps them focused.
Oh, thank you.
And curious about the slight accent.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Germany, so if you were wondering about that.
But John has an actual question. He says, are you supposed to just have one single style book on the master, then change the view to each view to load styles into the same style book? Occasionally I get the style not supported on devices.
Yeah, so the way that it works is when you're working with multiple views, you need to first place your style book onto the master and load the style that is related to what you have set in a drop-down. So one of the things I showed in a drop-down is setting a style for the master. So let's say the master style that you've set is an Android style. You put a T-style book onto your form, you load the Android custom style. And then if you didn't have any views and you now wanted to deploy that style to, let's say, Windows, it would give you that error message that you mentioned about not being supported, because we have built-in platform detection that is actually built into the style. So the style knows what platform it's supposed to run on. And that's important for various reasons, one of them being that the styles and the style resolutions that are supported on each of the platforms vary. So, for example, we have on Android, we have 4 different resolutions that are supported, but a Windows style only comes in a 1x resolution. So that's why we built the styles for each of the platforms. For example, mobile, we have different icons on the style, etc. That's why if you were only creating a master and you didn't have a specific view created, then you should look at some of the, I think I have some code examples on my blog, and I can look for that again, that explains how you can use ifdefs to load the proper style. So you could do ifdef, iOS, load the style at runtime. There's a way to use RC data, which is basically referencing the style at runtime so that it loads the proper one for each target device. Alternately, of course, you could use a view. So you could create a view for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. And in that case, you would, again, select the T-style book that you should already see because you've set it on the master, double-click it, and then load the appropriate style. If you have multiple views for one platform, so for example, multiple Android views or multiple iOS views, you will need to load the style, select the same style every time. So you double-click on the T-style book, open, and then select your style. So for example, the premium iOS style. And that's important because at runtime, we detect what the closest view is for that device, and we need to make sure that a style is available for that if you're overriding the default behavior. Of course, if you're working with the native styles, then that's not an issue, because we handle that for you. But if you're working with custom styles, that's an important step to follow.
And as Sarina mentions, and Jim also covered, they both covered in their code rage sessions, since we use stream inheritance for the settings of properties on the forms, when you put a style book on the master, that object exists in the form class for all of the views or target platforms you might build for. When you switch to each of the specific device views and set any properties, those property settings are stored in a separate stream that is merged into for whatever platform you build. And you can see that by the multiple $Rs that'll show up in your forms unit source code.
Correct.
So that way, by going to each of the custom views, device views, I never know what to call that thing on the right-hand side. I'm sure there's a name. There's the master view and the non-master view. Sorry.
I saw also a question earlier about how to handle behavior if you have a portrait a very specific behavior for portrait versus landscape. So with FireUI, you can easily lay out your application so that it has and supports built-in behavior. So for example, we have our MultiView component that has built-in behavior that you can manually override if you wanted to. We also have, of course, support for margins, anchors, layout managers, alignments, etc., so that if you had one user interface that you wanted to have the button, for example, always be aligned in the top left corner, you could parent the button to a toolbar and then set the anchor on the left or alignment to left, depending on how many controls you have on that toolbar. You would have the same layout if you used that approach across landscape and portrait. However, if you wanted to have very specific and very different behavior for a landscape, an app that's running in landscape versus portrait, then you could use two separate forms, and you could use an on-resize event to detect what orientation the user is running the device in and then loads the appropriate form. We do have a demo that ships with XE7 that explains how to do that, and I think it's called Forms, and it's in mobile samples user interface, I believe. It's in a mobile samples user interface folder that is included with XE7.
Yeah, I just want to mention one other thing. While there's no questions coming in, let me turn on my screen. We have a second set of skill sprints that you might want to register for. They're the FireUI skill sprints, and I just found the URL off a link on Marco's blog. So let's see if I can get that to show up. There it is. But I'll put that in on one of these. I'll put it in the chat window as well, so you can grab it from either the Q&A log or the chat window. If you're interested in FireDAC, we have a whole series of 10 FireDAC skill sprints that are going to be happening on Thursdays, same time, 6 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m. Different registration than this skill sprint series on Tuesday. The skill sprint series on Tuesday is based on a wide range of topics that you can see on the Tuesday skill sprint landing page.
Yeah, that's going to be a great session if you're interested in FireDAC. Our Universal Data Access Library for developing apps, of course, works across all the supported platforms, and we will cover a range of topics, as David said, from a basic introduction to BDA to interbase migration, for example, and various more advanced topics as well. So this was going to be a great series to sign up for.
Yeah, actually, the sessions in March on in-memory datasets and local SQL are really useful too, if you're not talking to a database, because those sessions are how you can create datasets in memory and then do SQL queries against them, which is really powerful. I can't tell you how many times I wished I could have done that in the past.
And then I'll put in one other plug for a third set. Let's see if I can get to this one on the come on, there it is. Okay. Every Friday, if you want to spend time, there's also, here, I'll put that in the chat window. We're going to do technology partner spotlights. This Friday is going to be Ray Konopka from Ray Software talking about the Ray Software products, followed by DevExpress and their VCL controls, TMS software. I've just signed up also Fast Reports. They're joining us, and others are coming up as well. Sound is off again. I didn't change the sound. It says it's coming through. Let me put that URL. So each of these are different registrations, but every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday we'll have online events this quarter. Mm-hmm. The skill sprints that you're here today, the FireDAC on Thursdays, and the technology partner spotlights on Fridays. So come and join all the fun and see a whole range of things that are happening surrounding the products. And Jens reminded everybody that he did local SQL last year as the FireDAC part. Oh, I'm paused again. That's probably why. So there's the Tech Partner Spotlight page, and I've put that link in the Q&A and also in the chat window. You want to click there and go to those. So three different skill sprints. This is the one that is the continuation of the skill sprints that have taken place since last May. This is the topic we're covering today with Sarina. Again, here's the schedule. And there's some in March that we're still working on the topics, so stay tuned. Once you're registered for each of the series, whether it's the Developer Skill Sprint, the FireDAC Skill Sprint, or the Technology Spotlight will be updating the landing page, but you only need to register once for the time that you want, and you'll get reminded as each of those comes up, and stay tuned to the schedules and landing pages for the topics for the things that are to be announced.
Great, and this recording, of course, will be made available later on. You'll find it on YouTube. You should be getting an email, I believe, with a link to it, and I'll do a blog post, a follow-up blog post on some of the things that I've shown today, and provide links to previous blogs I've done on FireUI, etc., to cover some of the questions that came up today during the webinar as well.
Yeah, and for the Developer Skill Sprint landing page, which is on the screen now, we put the newest, most recent Skill Sprint recording link. It gets added to the topic area on the right-hand side, but there's a playlist on Embarcadero's YouTube channel, Embarcadero TechNet. Look for the Skill Sprints playlist in the list of playlists, and you can subscribe to the playlist and see other videos that show up there. So let's see. Would you consider a quick report to the partner settings? I reckon Jack's asking about it. It's one of the best things. I'll invite them. I've been inviting all the tech partners to come in. We're going to be doing these throughout the year as well, not just in this quarter. So we'll have plenty of Fridays to get all our technology partners that want to take part to create the session, and we'll schedule it in. But thanks for that suggestion, Jack. Jatin, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, is saying, why is it necessary to create and install a package to add support for different device views? Why can't the IDE just be told, given size, pixel density, and all of that? I know we did that in the early version of the IDE before we had all of this customized views and so on, and you could just go and say custom device and put the bitmap and put the resolution and the client area height and width, and that would do it. But now we have all these views and multi-views, right?
Yeah, and now we also have the runtime detection built in. So before, you really were designing more for the layout in the IDE, in the sense that you weren't loading a specific view at runtime. So now what you're creating, if you're creating a view, your own view, you would create a package, and we have instructions on how to do that on the doc wiki, and Jim McKeith has also done some blog posts on that topic as well. And then you install that package into the IDE. It's quite a simple process, actually. I've covered it also in blog posts. And then you would see your device in the IDE under Views, and then you would add it to the users list of your project. So then at runtime, if you're running on that particular form factor, for example, a 4-inch Android device, it would use your particular view instead of the default view if you had one that you had created. Generally speaking, though, you don't necessarily need to create a view. Most people, I think, find it that they don't need to create a view for their specific device unless they are looking to fine-tune the user interface for a very specific form factor.
Yeah, so I had some blog posts and some videos showing how to do that with the Android Wear watches, so if you want to target those. And those are different enough devices that it makes sense to have a custom view for those. But otherwise, for phones, different size phones, or et cetera, like let's say you have the Galaxy S5, you probably really don't need to add another view for the Galaxy S5, just because it's going to be similar enough to the views that are built in. So you can generally get away with just using the built-in views.
I see a question here, too. Somebody was asking about how to design an application where it's running in full screen mode on a tablet and a tab view on a phone. So I think one of the demos I showed today, and I've shown this in other Code Rage sessions as well on FireUI, is that you can show and hide user interface elements. So for example, if you're building an application for both phone and tablet, you would be able to show and hide some of those controls. So for example, if you have a list box or additional tabs, etc., on one that you don't want to show on the other, you can disable the visibility on the actual view, and then at runtime it will not show that user interface. In addition, if you had a very different UI, you could also create a new form, but usually just toggling the visibility is enough.
And again, that all works because of the form inheritance. When you create custom views for different platforms, device form factors, you'll look in the source code and there'll be linker options for loading in parts of specific platform and device views that override the main view, the master view. And so when you set those when you set properties in the master view, those will be inherited by all of the device views. When you set properties in the device views, they will override the original master view properties, whatever those properties might be. Style book, we had a question earlier today. How do I create style that, you know, if I don't use style book, then you get whatever the default style is for the platforms you build for. But otherwise, create a master view, create custom views, and then put a style book on the master view, and then set the style book name property in the device views. And when it's built, you'll get the right custom view.
Yeah, when you're working with custom styles, the really key thing to know about is that with FireUI, you want to put a style book on the master, which is your main, your main view. Set the style, load a style to it that is associated with the style setting you have selected in a drop-down in the master. So, for example, Android, load a Android style. Set the style book on the form to the style book you have. So, for example, style book 1. And then on each view, you just double-click on that T-style book and load the appropriate platform-specific style. And the reason that's important is because at runtime, we detect the view most closely matching your device that you're deploying the app to and running the app on. And so you want to have the style loaded on each of the views. So if you have an iPhone view and iPad view, you're going to load the same the same iOS style twice inside the IDE. So that at runtime, it detects the most closely matching view and then loads that view on your device.
I create a component that just contains the view in it, and then I just drop that component on my form that adds the unit to the uses clause and make sure that my application is using the correct.
Let's see. Dante's asking about the links to things that you referred to, Sarina. I know you're going to do a blog. I don't know if you
I'm going to do a blog that talks about some of the previous articles I've written and that others on the team here have written on FireUI.
Sorry.
And I'll be posting that either later today or tomorrow, so look out for that. And it's on blogs.embarcadero.com/Sarina Dupont. And you can also find my blog on community.embarcadero.com, and that's our community site. And we have a blog there as well, the top-level menu blogs. You can go there. And I'll be posting links to that. And the demos I showed you, they were mostly actually demos that we include with the product. So anything I showed you today you can do with the templates, or one of the demos was creating a new project.
Do either of you remember, because I may get this wrong, the sample that we shipped, the mobile sample, is it system info or sysinfo that gives you information about the platform you're on? And
device
so on?
info.
Is it device info?
Yeah, we have a mobile snippet. So when you go to the documents, public documents folder on your hard drive, that's usually where the demos get installed to, unless you've chosen to install them elsewhere. You can go to Object Pascal or C++, and then you go to mobile snippets, device info, and that's a really good example of that. And I know somebody was also asking about what to do if you have two different forms. So, for example, if you wanted to have a form that you designed specifically for portrait mode and have a second form that you designed specifically for landscape mode, you can use the onResize event to detect what orientation user is running and then loads the correct form. So we have a demo that you can look up, and it's under Mobile Samples User Interface Forms, and it's a demo that's included with the product. You can also find it in our SourceForge directory, but it's our forms demo, and that shows you how to do that.
Okay.
There was also a question about, are there any tricks to adding a view in the middle of a project? Would the new view inherit all changes currently on the master? When you create a view, it inherits what is on the master. So if you have, one of the recommended ways of using FireUI is to lay out your application as much as possible on the master and then fine-tune on the view. So, for example, if you wanted to change the title of your application and you had 10 views, it's recommended to do that on the master. But what happens is if you've created a view and then made a change to that particular label, that will persist because you've decided to make a change on that view. And it's designed so that if you end up making changes on the master, they don't get streamed down to the view if you had insisted to make a change on the view. So, for example, in my case, I had a master view that set my application title on the toolbar label, but then on the iOS view, I changed it to my iOS application, on the Android view, my Android application. Now, if I changed the title on the master, that would only persist to new views or views where I previously had not changed the title. So I hope that answers your question.
And one person asked, if I have all these different views for different platforms, do they all get linked in? And the answer is no. only the view for the platform you choose. If you choose to build for Android, you'll get that whatever Android view that you create for your application. Unless you're doing some kind of dynamic loading of form files or something else that you're doing in code, but at design time and link time, you'll only get the view that you build for that platform. Yeah, SourceForge is running real slow. I'm trying to get that link, that name for
I also
Scott,
just pasted it in.
Oh, you did? Okay.
The location of where you can find that on your hard drive.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up a couple things while you're putting in questions. We have two other weekly events happening this quarter. One is on Thursdays, same time, 6, 11, and 5. We have FireDAC developer skill sprints. These are 10 sessions all about FireDAC and FireDAC capabilities. So if you're building database apps and multi-device database apps, Windows apps, you want to use FireDAC components for high speed and highly customizable for different SQL backend databases, then join us. You only have to register once, just like you registered for the Tuesday event. And then we're also on Friday at 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. we're doing Embarcadero Technology Partner Spotlights all quarter. So those links are there. You can look at my blog post today, has the link to all three. Of course, you've already registered for the developer skill sprints. I reminded everybody on the landing page for developer skill sprints, this is where the videos in sort of reverse order, the newest one will show up on the skill sprint replay. They're also in the playlist for developer skill sprints. I put that in the Q&A log. This is where all of the skill sprints going back to the first one back from May are included on that playlist. So you can always subscribe to the developer skill sprints playlist and get it there. So Dante's asking about the other webinars. So here's the reg page for the FireDAC skill sprint, and then Dante, here's the other one, which is the Technology Partner Spotlight. That's both of those are now in the Q&A log.
And I'll go ahead and paste in the links here for the blog post I did on the smartwatch, and it walks you through the process of creating that package, installing it, updating the XML file to have the image information for the for it, etc. And also links to a download that includes all those smartwatches as well if you want to start developing for the smartwatch.
There's also a question here. Yeah, that's great, Jim. Thank you for doing that. There's also a question here that says, what file/files are the device view forms in? Can you specify the name of the files? So I don't know if you're referring to the actual files that are created for each of the views. So if you were to go into the folder that you've saved your project in, you would find various FMX files. So for example, I had an employee manager demo, and that's hrmanager.ipad, hrmanager.iphone, .iPhone 4-inch, .lg, extra high definition iPhone, etc. So those are the files that you would find in your folder if you've created the view. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does. If not, please feel free to type in a follow-up question.
It's sort of an appending of the form file name .fmx.ios, .win,
Correct.
Android, and so on.
And I also wanted to mention that the view system, maybe that will answer your question further. The view system, once you've created a view, if you're opening the project, it will look for that. It will look for that view, and it references it by name. So if you now go ahead and change that to, your own file name, so hr.manager.myiphone, it's not going to be able to find it. So it's using those file names are related to the views, and it expects that structure. So if you're opening a project and afterwards are changing that and then are opening the project again, it won't be able to find those views.
Karam, I'm probably pronouncing your first name wrong, is mentioning about the new material design by Google with Android Lollipop 5. Any discussion of material?
A lot of the material design introduces a lot of different paradigms around animations, and a lot of those types of animated effects you can do using animations that we have and the animation support that we have in FireMonkey. And you can also, of course, customize some of the components, including the MultiView, to add additional functionality. You could do the same, for example, for some of the other controls like buttons, etc. So a lot of the material design functionality is around animations, and we have a variety of different animations built into Rad Studio.
Custom views, the blogs are nice, but should you cover some specific, like where do I
Yes,
get?
so there is actual math that you do to get the min-max logical size, and we can, I think I've written a blog post on that, on how you calculate that, but if not, Jim or I could do a follow-up blog post on when you look up the dimensions for a device, you look up the resolution, you look up, you know, the points per inch, you can, or pixels per inch, you can, there's a way to calculate what the correct size would be.
I think I have some of the details in that in my Moto 360 blog post I just put in the chat log a few minutes ago.
On how to set the min and max sizes, and you could also look at the source. You could look at the source files for our
exactly
min max sizes that we've set on, for example, the Android tablet or the Android tablet or Android phone as well. That would probably be good guidance, and I think we have some information on the doc wiki as well on that.
Actually, I did the Moto 360 blog post. I just looked at the doc wiki, followed the instructions, and then wrote the blog post from that. So it does pretty good there.
And there's a question: is the master view in XE6? No, master view. The master view concept, the concept of views in FireUI is a new feature in XE7.
Yeah. So if you're migrating an app from XE6 to XE7, you're in XE6. You just define your one form, and then in XE7, that becomes your master view. So the master view is what was your one form in XE6.
And there's always a master view. When you first create a project, file, new project, multi-device, Delphi C++, you choose a template, you'll have a master view. That's the main form. And you can choose a target and hit run, and you'll get the default behaviors for each of those platforms. It's only when you want to start customizing the views and view sizes and components that are on them that you'll start going further.
Either way, I think you said earlier the question was iPad mini, but if you're looking to design an application for an iOS tablet form factor, then you want to select the iPad view.
Yeah, Apple doesn't differentiate between the iPad and iPad mini as far as your apps go.
Ravi was asking a couple things. I think one part was about styles for other kinds of platforms, and I was just getting ready to type in, and I'll continue that while you both talk about styles versus views for different devices and platforms, and I'll type in to remind him to come next Tuesday for Brian's bitmap style design.
Sure. We have built-in native styles, so we have bitmap-based styles for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. For iOS, we support out-of-the-box 2x and 3x resolution. So if you are deploying an app to, for example, an iPhone 6 Plus, it would automatically load the 3x version of all the graphical assets that make up the iOS 8 style, and the 2x version of the graphics that make up the iOS 8 style on an iPhone 6, for example. Same is true for the iPad as well. For Android, we support 4 different resolutions: 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. Mac, 1x and 2x for Retina, and Windows 1x. So those are all built into the IDE and will be loaded automatically at runtime if you're just working with the default styles. If you're working with custom styles, you would load a T stylebook onto your master and then assign a style, load a style to it, set the style on the form, and make sure that the style you're loading to your T stylebook is the same as the style that you've selected in the drop-down on the master. For each view that you've created, you need to load a custom style once you start working with a custom style because it will expect it at runtime. That is also true if you're working with iOS or with multiple iOS views. So if you have an iPhone view and an iPad view, you're going to want to load the iOS view related style for on both of the views.
And then Jack asked, is there a compile run iOS simulator? And iOS simulator is a choice as a target platform. And I think, Jim, you typed in answers, right?
Yes. On the simulator, yeah, you can target the simulator. Depends on the platform. Object Pascal and iOS Simulator 7 works great, for example.
Yeah, C++ Builder just does not support the simulator currently.
Yep, and then iOS Simulator 8, they broke something in that, so it's not working yet.
But you can use the 7 simulator.
Yep, that's what I do. It works.
Yeah,
works good. And then it works on 8 devices.
Jack asks, is there a print function to print each view and share? I mean, I have some apps you can send to a Wi-Fi printer if you do share.
I think he's talking about on the IDE of the actual views themselves.
Oh, in the IDE.
Yes.
To print each view. I would just use the Windows snip tool.
Snipping.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Just
tool.
take a screenshot.
Use the snip tool and grab each design view and save it as a bitmap. I use the window snipping tool all the time when I'm doing blog posts of screen grabs. Yeah. But you can save a bitmap of the live bindings designer.
That's true.
And also if you use UML modeling, you can save that bitmap as well. But there isn't currently a save bitmap for the IDE form designer.
So Jack asked if we plan to continue to support Google Glass in its future incarnations, as they're planning to, it's on hold right now for a revamp. As far as I know, we'd like to support Google Glass, but until it's released or we know what it's going to look like, it's really hard to commit to that.
Currently, it's in the product, so currently there's a view for it. We provide out-of-the-box support for it, so you can deploy to it. It's an Android device that's supported, and we created a view for it so that you can easily design for it because it has the right dimensions of that Google Glass form factor. You see the Google Glass view in the IDE. That being said, if you have your own smart device, for example, a Moto 360 watch that you want to design for, and you want to create a smaller form factor and a smaller view so that you can fully customize the layout of your application for that view, you could create your own custom view and load it into the IDE. It's create a package, install it into the IDE, and then add that unit to your users clause of your application to make sure that at runtime, when you're deploying that application to your watch, for example, your Android watch, it actually selects the correct view for you. And Jim McKeith has done several posts on that, and I just actually created a resources post about half an hour ago that has a whole list of resources for FireUI and the multi-device designer styles, etc. And I'll put this in here as an answer so everybody can see the link, and it's also on community.embarcadero.com. If you click on my blog, it's my most recent blog post.
And Google has actually made a statement about for Google Glass, people developing apps for Google Glass. They said keep developing apps for Google Glass because they're planning to have a new version of the hardware eventually and expect all the apps to continue to work on it. So,
brought up Sarina's blog, so there's the article and other blog posts that she's done as well, the FireUI resources. Neville asks, is there something the code where you can interrogate at runtime what platform size and variation you're running on? And Jim, you put a link.
Yeah, I had someone else ask this on community site today, and I posted a link to some code that I've used that goes out and gets the pixels per inch, the physical screen resolution, and the logical screen resolution. Now, the physical screen resolution is the actual number of pixels on the device. The logical is actually, what I do for that is I just get the dimensions of the form and that tells you the basically design time resolution. That's the resolution you work at design time. Now, there's math you can use to calculate the two, but I found that's the easiest and it gives me the most accurate answer. So you can take a look at that code there, and that's what I use for the ones I've created, and it's always worked for me.
And that resources link, I have links to many different webinars we've done on FireUI and specific features in addition to what I showed today, and also links to some different samples that Jim McKeith has created, David I has created, and other members of the team on all the different features that make up the collection that is FireUI, of a collection of features that is FireUI. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for attending and all the great questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone, bye.
Bye.